good session today, and kicking off things, I really wanted to try to set the scene a fair bit about this whole market that we're in, where we've come from, where we're going, and start to highlight some of the, we're calling them trends, I guess, predictions of where we think things are going. Not surprisingly, we're privy to lots of cutting edge work that our clients are doing and research groups and things like that around the world. So I wanted to just try and synthesize all that into a bit of a summary for you all to get you started. I know in Europe it's the start of your day, so obviously there's lots more sessions today that we'll sort of key off onto. But yeah, running ahead with this one, I guess the good news, not sure if you're all aware, but there's been lots of surveys done, and you might actually be, well, hopefully you'll be very pleased to find out that the best job in America is actually being rated as an enterprise architect. And I'm not making that up. That comes from a number of surveys. One of the most recent ones comes from Glassdoor. So it's a bit of maybe a bit self-selecting because it's possibly a bit tech focused. But this is literally, of all the jobs in America that are talked about, Glassdoor do an algorithm where they look at basically the average salary, job satisfaction, how many openings there are for that position, and enterprise architecture comes out as number one. So it has one of the highest average salaries. It has an average job rating of 4.1 on a scale of 1 to 5, and they talk about there being something like 14,000 current openings. Now, I guess I did say it's a little bit tech focused. So 15 of the top 20 jobs are actually tech, which is pretty awesome. We're in the right, I guess, market. And the first non-tech ones were things like HR manager and business development manager around number 13 and number 14. So even the top 10 are all kind of tech positions. So yeah, we're all in the right industry. That's the good news. We can all ask for our pay rises now. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Gartner's hype cycle. I particularly love the trough of disillusionment. I've seen so many, cool things come and some go. I think some of them do bottom out through the trough of disillusionment and not ever come up to this slope of enlightenment. But needless to say, at different stages in my career, I've been at different phases in this, and yeah, right now I'm feeling pretty bullish. I've seen some pretty good growth coming out of COVID, and I'm sure that'll be a theme that a lot of the other presenters will talk about, and I'll talk about a little bit. But I think we are coming out the other side of that now, and I'm feeling pretty confident about us being able to affect a lot of good change. The whole move to work from home is I think in some ways an opportunity for us as EAs. It distributes the workforce. It of course means that collaboration needs to be much more electronic and digital, and that's become a new catalyst now for a lot of the transformation projects we're working in. But we've got a long way to go. So with that, I'm not sure how many of you know, I'm assuming you know this movie, Back to the Future. So about, well, we've been doing this, as Peter said, for over 20 years. And I think it was sort of 7 years ago now, I wrote a piece for InfoWorld. So this was back in 2015. I think it was pretty much exactly 7 years ago now. And obviously you can see from the title there, it was, well, where will we be in 5 years' time? So, obviously where will we be in 2020? Now, I guess the first disclaimer is there, and I'm happy to say, is that I think COVID did put a bit of a delay on some of those things. So I think it's probably fair that, we're 7 years now from my 5-year predictions. And yeah, I think it's probably a fair point to reflect on them. So let's do that. So what were the things that we talked about back then, 7 years ago now? And so I've sort of pulled out a few of them here with little call outs. I guess sort of starting on the left there, you can see one of the big themes that we were talking about 7 years ago, and indeed what we've been talking about for 20 years. It was indeed why I started this company. It was all about bringing metrics and analytics and algorithms to this enterprise architecture practice, so that, I don't know if any of you remember, 20 years ago, it was very diagram driven, very, very drawing centric. And so I brought all of my research, which was around how you can use architecture to do different analysis techniques that no one else could. So I brought that to the table in what's now, of course, embodied in Abacus. And again, I don't know how many of you know that Abacus stands for architecture-based analysis of complex systems. So, that's the fundamental core of what Abacus is for, is to do these algorithms. So certainly 7 years ago, not sure if you remember, but Gartner was really pushing a phrase called the algorithm economy. So that was something that we were fully supportive of. And, in general, KPIs and all that sort of stuff. So that was one theme. Another theme in the middle there was something about our title. Would we go from being enterprise architects to becoming, something else, digital transformation specialists or something like that, change agents, all these kinds of things, not sure. Top right there, we're talking about how this isn't a once and done thing. It's got to become I don't want to say business as usual, but it's got to become embedded in what everyone does in their day-to-day activity. So architecture needs to be democratized, and by that we mean citizen-driven, pushed out into the business. It can't be something that's done in some ivory tower, some head office somewhere where you've got the the architecture and strategy team and they don't really talk to anyone else. It really has to be as distributed and as democratic as you can. So that's something that needs to say enables this continuous ability to keep doing this architecture stuff, and it just becomes hardwired into what a company does. And a few other things were there. There was definitely some phrases like digital twin, and obviously Internet of Things and stuff like that was pretty nascent back then. Open APIs. So that was the sort of stuff we put our stakes in the ground 7 years ago. So how did we do? I think we did pretty well. I guess you can see here with the tick marks. I think those ones, I don't think any of us are surprised by. Metrics has got and has become more prominent. The whole concept of data-driven enterprise architecture or data-informed enterprise architecture is now much more accepted. So we're pretty proud that we pioneered all that, and we're still at the forefront of that. Very much about the continuous nature of enterprise architecture is still the case, and I'll have a whole section about that, actually, how that continues to be a trend. Digital twins, bit dubious. I don't think there's been too much written about that now or thought about that. It's as a concept, it's perfectly fine. Open APIs absolutely is something that's getting more and more accepted. I guess the one big question mark in the middle there is the title. I don't really see much of that. I don't see us moving away from being called enterprise architects. Indeed, as you saw on the Glassdoor survey, it's a perfectly well branded title that absolutely is successful in the market. I've always heard this one liner: if you add architect to your title, you can basically get $10,000 a year more. So whatever I am, architect is essentially where we are. So I think enterprise architect as a title is here to stay, and I've got no problem with that. So with that, though, let's try and, I guess, look to the future. So rather than back from the future, let's look into the future. So I've tried to pull together here a collection of trends. Okay, so these are definitely things that you can go out and you can Google, obviously, all these different sort of thought pieces from the various analyst groups and the big consultancies and things like that. And some of them have resonated basically with us. So that's really what we've done. We've tried to pull together a handful of trends that I think resonate with us, and I would absolutely rubber stamp and say, yep, I concur with. So let's just go into those now. The first set is actually just 3 here, and we're calling these mega trends. So these are essentially trends that are beyond enterprise architecture. They're not specific to our specific profession. They're trends generally in the business community. Now, there's many other ones out there, and these ones largely are technology focused trends, of course, but they're ones that I think apply to us as enterprise architects, and certainly all the industries we work within, and needless to say, are something that I think is going to become more and more prominent over the next, let's say, 5 years. So each of these I'll go into in a lot more detail, but you can see them there. So the first one is kind of that similar continuation of the one that we had 7 years ago, which is that, there's more and more of a continual transformation required. And, the curveballs like COVID have really brought the supply chain issues into sharp focus. I'm sure all of you are aware in your professional and personal lives how long it takes to get something delivered now, if it's across borders and things like that. So there's lots of initiatives now, with things like reshoring and good shoring, and even America has actually set up in policy now a concept of friend shoring. So there's lots of different ways you can think about this and start to understand how you can do it. But it's fundamentally all about trying to get more predictable in the supply chain, because we've seen that these things are really struggling. The next megatrend, and again, remember, I'm going to look at these in more detail. The next megatrend is really around cost management. So there's been studies, and I've been involved in these for 20 years, trying to put an ROI to doing things like enterprise architecture and trying to understand what the benefit is and things like that. It's still a struggle. We're still finding that fundamentally cost predictability is the big challenge. So not even so much as saying cutting costs per se. Okay, now I know we'd love that to be the case. And when we look at the KPIs that CFOs are using, they're often about cost reduction and things like that. But really what we can be pretty confident about is architecture is better at making costs predictable. Okay, to which you can then make informed decisions, right, about how you might want to try and reduce things. Because without that rigorous approach, it's much more finger in the air, and moonlight and the goat and all those kind of subjective ways that people might try and do their business cases. So certainly cost management, though, is a theme that we have a good role to play, and need to say I'll talk a lot about how we need to be part CFO and part analyst, and finance is got to be, the terms of finance has to be something that we're pretty confident with. The third mega trend here that I just want to call out is all around security. So again, that's something that's always been around, but it's getting more and more. And I'll show you some pretty shocking, maybe the word, but it's pretty disappointing statistics around how many attacks the different industries are facing and how that's increasing year on year, and it's really pretty dire. But I need to say, architecture's enterprise architecture particularly is an approach or a way of thinking that can really start to help to get on top of this. And I'll sort of explain some of the approaches that we'd recommend there and some of the ways that's moving going forward. So beyond those three mega trends, there's four kind of enterprise architecture specific trends I just want to call out, okay? And you can see them listed here. So the first one is around industry specific cloud and knowledge. And so I'll talk a lot more about that, but basically the concept that, as we move up the stack from software as a service, platform as a service, all that, you're getting up into the area where companies are of course looking to move to the cloud as a way of getting cost control and cost management and cost reduction. But one size doesn't fit all necessarily, so you'll end up with multi-cloud and stuff like that. But also there are offerings out there that are starting to be very industry specific, okay? And I'll talk a bit about those. And some of the big providers, AWS, Azure, are starting to offer, industry specific clouds, okay? So we'll need to know, when is it right to go there, and understand, where the competitive differences are and things like that if you're going to go into these different, industry clouds. So that's one area. The next one, which is really continuing on from our core, which is all around analytics, is all about automation. Okay, we've been doing this for enough years, and we've got enough success stories of using metrics to make things better. You guys would all be familiar with those those kind of quotes like you can't improve what you don't measure and all that sort of stuff. So absolutely. I'll kind of introduce some of the KPIs, some of the different approaches to automation that we're seeing are really giving a step change in productivity and efficiency. You're obviously working within a large, complex organization, so you've got to be able to synthesize all of this data into something that's palatable by the stakeholders who need to see it. Which actually brings us to the next one down, which is this visibility and discoverability. That's a lot to do with the fact that you've got to be talking the language of the stakeholders that you're working with, and any of you are familiar with the different frameworks. Talk about stakeholder concerns and a viewpoint as to address a concern, all that kind of stuff. It's a way of trying to communicate to people in ways they understand and that addresses the issues that they have. That has a a notational aspect to it. So if you're going to go and choose some boxes and lines style, that has to be familiar to them and understandable to them. It's a vocab as well, the nouns and the verbs you use when you're describing your architecture. So what are the objects, what are the relationships between them? That's fundamentally important in how you talk. But it's also at a more tactical level. You need to be able to do this quickly and efficiently and present it in a way that people can get access to. Okay, so it's not good enough, writing a quarterly report or an annual report about how things are. This needs to be right there on people's tablets when they need it in a meeting, and it needs to be navigable. It needs to be well composed. So there's lots of things that I'll kind of talk about there. And the last one is this trend, which we're seeing more and more, and there's lots of players trying to do this in different ways. And we've coined it the death of spreadsheets, but it's this kind of smart data catalogs. Okay, so it is the whole data-driven way of approaching this. It crosses over into portfolio management, which enterprise architecture is enterprise portfolio management. And that means whether it's the application portfolio or the project portfolio, the information lifecycle management, whether it's risk management. All these things ultimately, a lot of companies just do those with spreadsheets or do them in your SharePoint lists, right? Or now Teams lists, like they look great and they're fine, but there's nothing smart behind them, right? So it's about trying to bring all of the skills we have and all the algorithms and all the notational, interfaces and all the, the combination of, a data driven and a diagram driven together, and with all the road mapping and all those things to try to show that you don't need to just pick a specific tool to do each of the portfolio managements you need to do. Enterprise architecture can bring to the table that whole of enterprise portfolio management and show that line of sight from any one place in the enterprise to another, which is something that a tabular way is just never going to do. Anyway, we'll get into that specifically later as well. So, yep, welcome everybody. As Peter said, great to have you all here. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've had pretty close to 2,500 registrations for this event. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but that's pretty fantastic. So yes, 2,500 of you registered. I know it's pretty, it's late at night, or dare say in the middle of the morning in America, so I'm not too sure how many of you from the Americas are on here, but yeah, thank you. And as part of the process of setting up this event, we of course went out to you guys and asked, what things you're interested in, what are the use cases that you guys would like to hear about. So this is a bit of a quick summary of that. The interesting things here is it's pretty evenly spread, right? Look at that. There's a handful that are all pretty equal. So things like technical debt, change, integration, cybersecurity, cloud, APM, business process management. So it's pretty evenly spread across a number of pretty key themes. Interestingly, and I guess it's kind of giving it away, that largely maps to those 7 trends that we're going to talk about as well. I mean, there's 7 there. It's not the exact same 7, but that's really reassuring that the things you guys are really interested about and dare I say, keen to hear about and potentially struggling with matches some of the things, or in fact, most of the things that I'm sort of flagging as being trends here. So hopefully I can give you some insights into all of these, and we can go through this shared journey in the right direction, I guess. So yeah, let's get into these different trends. So there were 7 of them, so you can kind of count them down. Timing wise, yeah, I'm intending this to take about 40 minutes. So we should have a bit of time for questions at the end. So I'm not sure if you're putting your questions into the Q&A box as we'd like. I mean, put them in the chat, I guess, as well. But the Q&A is a place that I'm pretty sure Peter's going to go through and then ask me at the end. So feel free to fire any questions in as we start to get into the meat of this. We should have some time at the end, and I certainly intend to finish before the hour's up. So we should be okay though. So this first one, okay. So trend number 1, continual transformation and remodeling. So carrying on from 7 years ago, when we obviously knew that this wasn't a once and done thing, it's a continual process, and sadly that process often creates technical debt. We're seeing that it takes at least 5 years, okay, before you start to get some progress. So there was a great survey done by Harvard Business School here, which we flagged. You've got the link there on the slide, so go and have a read yourself. They asked about 1,500, I think it was well over that, different leaders in the IT industry. Asked them many questions, but one of the questions was, where are you in your journey? And obviously depending on how far through you are, so you can see there on the left hand axis, how much progress do you think you've made on a scale of 1 to 6? So what you see there is that the kind of dark orange is already more than half, like that's a 4 above. So you see that even up to 5 years, people don't feel like they're making very much progress. It's really after 5 years. So once you get to the 6 years to 10 years, you're looking at something like 75% of people feel like they've made pretty good progress. So we have to be patient. Okay, I know we've probably been doing this for that sort of time frame, but don't be too disappointed if you feel like it's taking time to make progress. Now that's a separate dimension. Of course, I'm sure you guys know that we have what's referred to by Gartner as the fastest time to value of any EA tool on the market. So we can get a repository up and running for you very quickly, and we can have good quality content in there. But it really brings home that message that, well, A, not enough people use Abacus, or B, having a tool is not the only answer. It's not going to solve all your problems for you. It takes time. It's a cultural change to get organizations on board with this. And yeah, it may take up as many as 10 years before you really start to get some advanced progress. But there is, some promise. Another stat that came out of this survey that they did was that 61% of the respondents said that data-informed decision-making was the most critical success factor to their success. Okay, so that's pretty exciting. Okay, so the thing that we've been, oh, dare I say, as a colloquial phrase, banging on about for more than 20 years. It's what my PhD was about, back in the 90s, was all about we can use data as an enterprise to make decisions, and you can discover data and get different, insights that no other organization could or no other approach could. So I'm really pleased to see now we're up, 60-odd% of people see that, data is the key thing to helping us make some valuable decisions. Okay, so I guess how do we jumpstart this? Are we ready? I mean, I can kind of take you through some of the journeys that we've learned and some of the different KPIs and things like that. So let's get into it. All right, so trend number 2, cost management. Like I sort of mentioned, historically, it's been proven that enterprise architecture can bring predictability to cost. Okay, which shouldn't be underestimated. It's not necessarily going to help you cut costs, though. Okay, but of course it depends on what you're trying to do. Once you've got some confidence in your numbers and confidence in the insights you're getting, making informed decisions is everything, right? That's the way it should be. We can accept that you might want to spend some more money. That's fine. Now, I guess the bad news or the sad news is no matter how long we've been talking about how enterprise architecture should be a value drive, value seen as a valuable thing. It should be all about return on investment and, time to value and business value and all that sort of stuff. Sadly, Deloitte did a big survey of CFOs, over 100 of them from, some of the large companies in North America, and they still ranked cost as a percentage of wanted to know about the IT department. So it's pretty sad. It wasn't, I think the 5th most important stat was all about, kind of business profitability and return on investment. So anyway, needless to say, cost is here to stay. It's something we have to accept and live with. And not surprisingly, the whole move to cloud and, dare I say, multi-cloud is one of the big drivers to try and get some control over the costs. Now, there's been a big study here that's been done by the Foundry. It's part of ITG, where they looked at what are the big initiatives that are coming and why are we doing cloud. So disaster recovery and business continuity was still the most important reason for doing cloud, and that should be familiar to us all. Getting some sort of stability of your infrastructure. So yes, cost is still important, and going to cloud, cost is absolutely something that is a hope there. Now, the other stat you can see called out there is that it's not that simple. Only 16% of organizations are going to a single cloud provider. So the vast majority of organizations are multi-cloud. Okay, so using different cloud providers for the different parts of their business. I mean, we're a, I don't want to say a victim of that, but we're the same. Avolution as a company, we certainly use AWS as our primary cloud provider, but we certainly have Azure at our ability, and we have various other local in-country cloud providers too. So we've had to do that as well. So needless to say, it's getting better. Or getting better. The move to the cloud is getting more and more. So this year it was around 41% of the IT infrastructure for companies was in the cloud, and that's looking to grow to sort of in the 60s over the next 18 months. So more than half of the IT going out into the cloud. And on average, companies are allocating about 30-odd% of their IT budgets to cloud. Okay, so all right, so cloud and multi-cloud though is still here to stay. It's a way of course, getting some sort of control over costs. It's the obvious thing is you're moving to OpEx from a CapEx. That should go without saying. But needless to say, it's more about that predictability. By going OpEx, you've got some predictability over what you're using, and you've got on demand and all that kind of stuff. A few more sort of call outs from another survey, which was Computer Weekly. While we're all moving in this direction, looks 90% of the migrations are delayed, not going as well as we thought they would be. 38% of them are concerned around security, and arguably 39% of them haven't realized the cost savings that they'd hoped for. And again, maybe people are spending something like over 70%. So again, cloud is not the holy grail. Absolutely, like enterprise architecture, it gives you some predictability over the way things are going, but it won't necessarily go as you plan. So there is an increased complexity when you start going to cloud, and we as architects need to work out how to do that, how to manage that complexity going forward. Which brings us on to the whole challenge for us as communicators. Really, like I sort of flagged right at the start, this concept that we need to be able to talk the language of business, and if the CFO sees the IT department just as a cost center, we've really got to get in there and start to try to communicate in the language that they understand. So we're part financial analysts. You can see all here the different skills that McKinsey think that EA teams need to have. It's interpersonal skills, of course, and professional competence, which around all the different topics. You've got to be seen as the the expert in the company. But fundamentally, we need to be able to talk in the finance way. So you can see that quote there on the right. Architects need to move away from PowerPoint. Don't just stand up and talk from a pulpit, kind of like what I'm doing today, and focus more on the language of business. The scenarios, the P&L impact, return on investment, trade-offs, all that kind of, and how the different recommendations we're making will impact the business from a financial point of view, and not just cost reduction, but also some sort of value creation as well. Going beyond that, of course, and what Abacus hopes to do is help you in that journey of communication, right? So Abacus hopefully brings to the table some good ways of communicating to all your stakeholders. So, think carefully about how you name your dashboards, right? They need to inform, and they need to, communicate in a way that's really palatable. So, rather than calling a dashboard something like, the CRM upgrade project, or, single customer view project, or something like that, why don't you call it something like enhanced customer analytics? Like you're starting to make this inclusive and starting to make it more palatable to people. If you present something as a way of engaging with the company and increasing profitability, rather than saying it's cutting costs, it might allow employees more easily to transfer to different parts of the company, or it might enhance senior management reporting, or it might do any number of other things that don't seem like they're immediately just a cost reduction. You'll help to get people to agree with the initiative and not be so resistant, and not simply see it as a cost-cutting exercise. So hopefully Abacus can do that, but needless to say, it comes to how you position these things and how you communicate them. And I'll talk a lot about that when we get to the visibility one, and the way that some recommendations we've got about how to sort of position things in a positive way rather than that negative cost-cutting way. You've got to capture people's attention. They've got to be pretty board ready. Again, you've got to be prepared to talk at the board level. You've got to show how these things are, how technology is a contributor, how it's a value creator. It's not just a necessary evil and something that you can, try to squeeze. You've got to try to talk at that board level. So always think about the one or two takeaways. That view there is a Sankey diagram. Try to sort of show how value flows through the business. Okay, so we can talk about the different customer journeys and things like that, but talk about how value flows, and show how IT is an inextricable part of the value chain in a business. So a lot of the frameworks now support value chain modeling. So that's something that we strongly recommend. So look at different ways to show how value flows, and talk about how, of course, the different initiatives and different things you have are part of the part of the solution. So it's all, again, positioning, but fundamentally it all comes into that cost way of talking. How do you, spin that on its head and talk about, look, cost management, sure, but let's talk about the value that we can bring as EAs. Okay, let's move on to the third trend. And I guess, I assume my colleagues will tell me if the audio is dropping out or anything. I am getting a couple of warnings here, but hopefully it's okay. So the third one around cybersecurity. So yeah, this is the one that, makes me pretty sad. Okay, so I don't know how easily you can see the statistics on there, but this is a year-on-year comparison, so 2021 versus 2020, and the different industries and how many attacks per week. Okay, so I know that might shock you. 1,600 attacks per week per organization, okay, in the education sector. Okay, so it's just awful stuff. So that's a 75% increase on 2020 numbers. Overall, it's been a 55% increase across the board. So this isn't going away. The hackers are out there, right? So the most popular types of attacks are things like botnets, taking over your computers to do a DDoS attack. Things like info stealers, good old getting your passwords and all that sort of stuff. And more, we're not seeing that the security agencies are seeing crypto mining as a much more popular hack that's happening, enslaving all your kids to, go and do crypto mining. So just, yeah, terrible stuff. We need to be able to cope with that. And needless to say, there is some things that we can bring to the table to help. So there's a number of frameworks that exist and we support. So you can see them there on the right. So things like NIST and SABSA, COBIT, TOGAF, they all have a role to play in being able to do some engineering according to, get well-engineered secure systems. So Abacus, like I said, it supports all these things. So, that's the NIST framework there. So you got to think about security. It's not something you just kind of bolt on the side. It's not, it's not just a viewpoint of your architecture. It has to be something that your architecture is structured. It has, a graph view or a graph database way that we think. It's something that is a very interconnected set of elements. It has many, many relationships or many, many bonds into all of the different elements within an architecture. Okay, so all of those different controls and all the different things you're doing from a security point of view can really start to help you, obviously get control of these things and protect yourself against all that stuff. Right, let's move on to the fourth trend. So this is the first of the enterprise architecture specific ones. Again, I can kind of hear that or see from my colleagues that the audio is a bit choppy. So again, I guess it's dropping in and out. I'm not sure why. Sorry about that. I hope it's hope it's coming through clearly enough in general. I'm not seeing a big flame in the chat window of everyone saying they can't hear me. So that's pretty good. I can see a count of the number of chats that are popping up there. Sorry.
Anyway, it has been choppy, but in the main it's fine.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. I apologize. All right, so anyway, let's look at the first of the enterprise architecture trends. Okay, so this is trend number 4, this industry-specific cloud and the sort of knowledge that's associated with that. So when we look at cloud, and of course, some of the big providers are starting to do these, industry-specific ones. Different industries have different demands of the cloud, and indeed, they can benefit in different ways. So a bit of a summary here from a great blog, which I'll put the link in at the bottom there, which is, some of the things that the different industries really seek to benefit from, inverted commas, the cloud. Okay, so of course, it opens up the potential to offer purpose-built industry-specific ones for retail and insurance and banking and all that sort of stuff. So not surprisingly, that's what some of the big cloud providers are doing. So AWS and Azure, they've all got that sort of stuff. So the important thing to think about here, like I mentioned at the start, is it's really where you're going beyond platform as a service, software as a service, or going up the stack. If you think of some sort of stack of layers where maybe capability is above the things like platform and stuff like that. You've got a service, there's all the frameworks have different ways of approaching this, but capability is definitely a pretty well recognized one. There's a number of frameworks out there that talk about business capability models, right? Business capability maps. Okay, there's a number of standard ones out there like PCF from the APQC. So I know that's not acronyms, but I presume you know those. So the process classification framework actually has a really good top level capability model. Indeed, it has industry specific capability models. So it's a really good place to start. But the important thing is that right from that capability level, you need to be able to understand that you can drill down through that again from a value point of view about how things are being delivered under that capability. And if the cloud providers are providing all the way up at the the top of the stack of capability, in the cloud, then you can start to build that into your overall architectures and understand where that fits in with all the broader other parts of your architecture. Remembering that, it's going to be multi-cloud, right? That seems like it's a given. You're not going to have a single cloud provider. So you're going to still have different ones you need to be, inverted commas, joining together. So your repository and your way of seeing your enterprise as a whole is still not going to be just one provider. It's never going to be like that. You're going to be managing a number of different providers. And even if they go up the stack a bit further, you're still going to have to manage that. So these capability maps become a key to being able to do that and drilling through in the different capabilities, which is what this animation is showing. It's all about, going down inside a given capability and seeing how that is provided under the covers. It's not just a black box, and it never should be. So, some of those industry-specific clouds do need to be teased apart and do need to be interrogated to see exactly how they're working. All right, so if we bring us to the next one, the fifth trend, so it's all around automation. So again, this really cuts to the heart, and it's a natural evolution of what we've been bringing to the market for certainly over 20 years. So the first thing is all about metrics, right, and KPIs. Okay, so there's some basic EA metrics which hopefully all of you have got a pretty good handle on. Even just the number of applications you have. The number of times we start onboarding someone and we ask them, well, how many do you have? And they're like, I don't know, and then they start digging out all these spreadsheets with different lists, and then find more and find more. So you'd like to think that step one or level one, at least in a maturity scale, is you have some cardinality, right? Some understanding of how many different things you've kind of got and how obviously complicated your world is. But that pretty quickly moves into some cost metrics. Now, I'd actually point out this comes from a blog that we recently did for the Open Group, and yeah, Peter mentioned our collaborations with the Open Group. So so Mark Dixon's going to present on TOGAF 9. I think it's later today, actually, UK time. So it'll be late in the night here, Asia Pac time. But so yeah, so you can go and grab this blog. The link's down there on the bottom right. Anyway, it talks about these kind of different ways that metrics become part of the story. So there's a whole lot of cost metrics, of course, just like we've been talking about with the cost management side of things. But really, we've got to see that moving into a much more advanced way of understanding metrics, because sadly, again, when we go back to that Deloitte survey of all the CFOs, where they said the number one metric they cared about was the cost of IT. It also started to highlight how little they saw or how little they spent on IT. So in fact, half of the CFOs said they spent less than 2% of their total revenue on IT. Right, that's shocking, right, for something that we of course all think is far more of an enabler and a value creator. And a further third were less than 4%. So you're looking at vast majority of large organizations are spending very little on IT, and we've got to change that around. We've got to change the way that they see EA as not just a cost center and not just a way to maintain the day-to-day operations. It's a way to enhance value and create things. So these different KPIs on the right, they start to tell that story. Right? They start to bring in hopefully some return on investment, hopefully some really useful things around efficiency and the trade-offs between different things and the value from security or a rich security architecture. So we've got lots of experience in all these different metrics, but there's a whole suite of metrics that go to this automation story, and obviously automating the calculation of all those and making those just something that's running. We have a whole algorithm engine, which I'm sure most of you know about. It just cranks away, it just churns away and does some really smart calculations behind the scenes that then, of course, just get surfaced in maybe a humble pie chart or something, on a dashboard. But there's a lot of, really smart stuff that goes on behind the scenes, including a whole lot of machine learning things. So there's a whole lot of work we can do around, filling in the blanks, colloquially, definitely augmenting the way EA is done. So there's this whole talk of hybrid EA, where there's a balance between the machine and the human, and I'll talk about that in some of these other trends. But yeah, the whole idea that metrics become this enabler, but if you're not doing them automatically and it's not just part of your day-to-day, dare I say, in the background, you're gonna be swamped. So we do have some things to help. So we have a whole way of, I'm sure most of you know, any of you that are clients of ours, one of the things that we pioneered is the whole no-code way of analyzing architectures. Okay, so leveraging the graph repository, you can go in and anyone can start creating algorithms, whether they're, again, those simple count algorithms or things that are more advanced, taking some value from somewhere and attributing it across the graph and then, changing it and multiplying it, adding it to something else, doing all these different things, augmenting that with machine learned logic as well. Okay, so filling in, even if we don't know the actual value for something, we can take the best guess from the machine and then continue on with our algorithm. And you might go through and this simple animation is showing again, against a business capability model, is showing actually, what was it? It was the number of applications I think that were contributing to it or something like that. So it's a complexity measure. So yeah, need to say no, it's actually a life cycle date. I can see a recommendation. I can see, so they're rolling up the recommendations against all the applications to the capability. So if you're planning to retire all the applications, then of course the capability is going to be ultimately potentially being retired. So the red, the good old tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate, or something like that, a portfolio metric, but it's taking it at a capability level from a technology layer. So again, talking at the business end, not at the technology end. And these things, of course, need to be wrapped up into dashboards. So tree maps we find really powerful. They're one of the most efficient visualizations of things because they're a rectangle, right? Everyone's screens are a rectangle. So when you're filling up a tablet with a tree map that you can drill in on, it could be showing any number of things. Okay, it could be showing complexity, it should be showing security risk, it could be showing costs, whatever you want it to be showing. You've got size and color as your 2 dimensions and degrees of freedom there. So there's anyway, think about how you're going to tell this story of the results of all these automations, because obviously there's a lot of data behind the scenes, and until you can make that single portlet, my holy grail is a single portlet that just sits on a CEO's dashboard or a CFO's dashboard that helps them understand something better about their business that only was available from the enterprise architecture team. Like, that would be fantastic. We're at the top table there. Okay, so moving on. Trend number 6. So this is the one where we sort of talk about talking their language and making this easy for architects to be on board with, right? So it's about not only the automation and making it very painless and getting a whole lot of content, it's fundamentally showing it in ways that are familiar to the audience. So I'm sure you guys recognize the symbols here in this animation. So that's AWS. So we have an AWS adapter. So of course you can just pull in your whole AWS infrastructure if you want into Abacus and then visualize it. Okay, we're showing some of our layout algorithms. So we have a whole lot of different ways that you can auto-generate a diagram, then lay it out, and you'll see different ways that might appeal to you. So this should be easy, right? You shouldn't be wrestling with your architecture, right? You should be able to just pull in from your CMDB, whether it's ServiceNow or something else, from your cloud providers, whether it's AWS or Azure, and you should be able to start to see that. Okay, now that's obviously just diagram driven. It's not doing much more than just exposing the visibility of things, but it's absolutely a necessary starting place, and you shouldn't have to wrestle with trying to get content into your repository. We've heard some horror stories of how long it's taken some of our competitors' tools to get arguably not even up and running, but try to deploy them. Again, we've got the fastest time to value. Our repository is completely adaptable, so we will just consume the content you have. The repository will adapt to it. Okay, so there's no of the square pegs in a round hole. So you really shouldn't have to wrestle with your repository, right? So that absolutely is not something we ever want to hear about. You should be able to get up and running very quickly, because it's still a multi-year challenge to get people to buy into what you're doing. So we certainly don't want to be part of the the bottleneck in that process. So again, I've mentioned we've done a lot of work in this. So that call out on the left there is we've done some master classes around how you can do reporting and visualization best practice. So I'd encourage you to go onto our YouTube channel, have a look at some of those things. There's white papers you can download through our website. So we've got lots of cool insights to how you can best sort of structure things, and even color schemes and things like that work really well, that we've found. So nonetheless, don't wrestle with these things. You've got to try to get on to doing some value creation as quickly as you can. It also brings up the topic of APIs. So again, it was something we flagged 7 years ago, and it's still the same now. Your tool and our tool should be open. It should be seen as a bit of a glue, a bit of a hub that binds all the things together. Okay, you should have the ability to pull content out of it, push content into it. That should be pretty painless. So we have all that. We have a a full open API. You can use all Postman and all those different things to interface with it. We have lots of clients who do that, and push and pull content between Abacus and other tools. That's fine. And these things exist in a federated world. So we're confident and comfortable with what Abacus does to work alongside various other tools that do what they do best. We're not megalomaniacal there. We don't want to own everything. We don't want to force you to spend 6 months putting everything into the tool before you get anything out of it. We're happy to be incremental about this and grow as your needs grow. So at the same time, though, it's important to appreciate, and this lovely little animation here, so I'm sure you recognize this from Jurassic Park, you've got to be careful what you integrate. Okay, so the kind of analogy here is, I don't know if you're familiar with the story of what kind of went wrong in Jurassic Park, aside from dinosaurs went crazy, was they were only counting the dinosaurs they knew about. Okay, they didn't understand or didn't know that the dinosaurs were breeding. Okay, so there was this whole other world going on, and we can all talk about that as the dark dark IT, whatever it is. It's the dark web. It's the it's all the stuff we don't know about. Okay, so just be careful that when you're plugging into different repositories, that you're being focused on what you're trying to achieve by plugging into those things. So don't, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So we've seen this concept of, I guess, what we're calling integration islands. You pull in a whole feed from your CMDB with all your devices, whatever, all your printers and stuff like that. And there's not really any point. It doesn't really add any value to the enterprise architectural stories. Okay, so be careful where you look. Make sure you get content into your repository that has value and then can be linked to other things, because that's what architecture is about. It's architecture is the whole is greater than the parts. You're trying to join these things together to get more value out of any of those individual parts by themselves. Okay, so just be careful about that. We can plug into any number of things. We've got an open API, we've got an adaptable, obviously like the Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. You've got to be careful what you put in there. And the last trend here, I guess what we're coining the death of spreadsheets, to be a little bit provocative. It's really the smart data catalogs kind of way of thinking. So there's been a lot of progress on that in the market anyway. Microsoft now has Teams lists, which are basically a layer on top of SharePoint. So we work with those. You can use Teams lists as a source. That's fine, just like Excel and Google Sheets and all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is we're being structured about this. So it's structured data, it's tabular data. It's trying to think about these things as a portfolio. Okay, and so each row has some kind of importance, whether they're the applications or whether they're the risks or the services or the capabilities, doesn't matter. They're just lists of stuff, right? And the important thing here is, just manually editing those things is going to be pretty tedious and of low value. Okay. Now, the consultancies will come along with all their favorite algorithms for, formula in the spreadsheet that, if you fill in this big, spreadsheet, you'll get some, recommendation for the, the future state or something like that. So that's fine. We've seen all that, but we can code all those algorithms. We work with our consulting partners to code the algorithms that they have, or no code them as it is. They code those. And so they can actually bring this along with our smart catalogs, and they can be augmented with the machine. So you can see here, this animation on the right is showing that all of Abacus's, no one else does this in the market, machine learning that can fill in these blanks, right? So we can learn from the graph fragments you have and start to understand, well, look, okay, it's costing a certain amount of money. It's only supporting a certain number of processes. It's, its disaster recovery level is so much. That might lend itself to being a retire recommendation. Okay, so if you look at your tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate, or there's various other frameworks there, but that filling in the blanks becomes incredibly powerful because your portfolios start to have an acceleration to them. Okay, or the management of the portfolios has an acceleration. So you'll find that when you start putting content into Abacus, Abacus starts to learn and starts to help you be more efficient. And we've got ways that you can auto-populate stuff, right? Once it passes a threshold like 99.9% confidence, the machine, we could potentially populate that for you. It's all user choosable. You don't have to, but being able to accelerate the efficiency of us and using the machine to be like a toolkit that's like obviously makes us better. That's this whole concept of hybrid AI or augmented hybrid enterprise architecture or augmented enterprise architecture. The machine's not going to replace us ever. It's just going to make us work more efficiently and make better quality recommendations more quickly, which is all part of the story. It's getting us to move up the value chain in the organization. Okay, so with that, that's 7 of them. So yep, this is really just the wrap-up slide to sort of remind you of those 7. So we went through the 3 mega trends of continual transformation, and it's not a once and done thing. Enterprise cost management, which largely means cloud, and the predictability that comes from OPEX versus CAPEX. It's obviously a key thing that's been around forever, and it will probably be around forever, as much as I'd like the CFOs to see the value of IT to be more than a 2% cost center. Cybersecurity, sadly, is getting worse and worse, and we're having to all cope with that. And then the 4 specific EA trends, which are around the capability, clouds, okay, and how they are all modeled, in things like AWS and stuff like that. Automation from KPIs all the way through to machine learnt, making this painless, automation and then visibility of things that you have. Don't spend your time wrestling with your EA. Just get the content in and then start to find the value that it brings and the insights that it can give. And of course, do that using things like machine learning to make the catalog smarter than just a dumb spreadsheet. With that, I think I've done to time pretty well. I guess we do have a bit of time for some questions here at the end. Hopefully the audio's worked okay, and need to say some of that made sense, even if you could hear it. So yeah, Peter, I guess I'd return to you, and
sure.
I'm not sure, are there questions?
Thank you, Tim. That was great. Thank you. And yes, there have been a few questions, and we have kind of 10 minutes or so left, so I'll quickly get into these now. I'm going to throw them at you, Tim.
Yep,
First
go for it.
question, which came in quite early from Farouk. How is the EA community foreseeing data-driven approaches in enterprise architecture, specifically in context with TOGAF?
Yeah, okay, good question. So I guess the first thing to really address there is that data-driven is something that we see as a complement to diagram-driven. Okay, so that's an important distinction. I don't think you should do one or the other, and there is a bit of a a kind of a cats and dogs kind of thing there. But you can actually be diagram driven and data driven. The two sort of should be hand and glove dovetailing together. So we certainly came to the market professing that 20 plus years ago. And that was, like I said, that was largely my motivation behind my PhD, was I saw things were heavily diagram driven, and I knew we had a whole data driven dimension we could bring to this. So that was kind of why I started the company. So that's continued on, and of course it's great to see that that's now getting popularized, and like that statistic I cited, 60% of the tech leaders now see data informed decision making as one of the key things that EA can bring. So yeah, so data-driven is important, and I know you specifically name-checked TOGAF there. So one of the good things about TOGAF, over and above a lot of the other frameworks that are out there, is that it does recognize that they talk about them as different kind of models now, but basically you should have catalogs, you should have matrices, and you should have diagrams. Okay, now by virtue of them saying you should have catalogs, already tells you that they think attributes or data are important. Okay, and don't take that for granted. There's a lot of frameworks out there that don't even care about attributes, right? They're purely diagrammatic or notational, and that's at its heartland what Archimate is, right? Archimate is just a notational thing. I mean, they talk about it as a unified modeling language and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't have attributes as part of its core. So needless to say, TOGAF is great, and it's, we've been a member of the Open Group for a long time and been involved in the standards there because it does recognize attributes are important. Now, they don't then mandate a whole lot of deep attributes into any of this decision making, to which we, of course, have worked with the Open Group for 20 plus years. And so when we work with clients who take something like the TOGAF framework off the shelf from us, we don't charge you. Our frameworks are all freely available. You just download them, you mash them together, you can make hybrids. We've augmented the TOGAF frameworks with metrics that we know are useful. So you get kind of like a TOGAF plus, right? You get attributes on that framework that we know are useful, and that, of course, affords you to do analysis that you otherwise couldn't do with an off-the-shelf TOGAF framework, right? So I guess that's the first point I'd say, is that TOGAF's pretty good amongst the hundreds literally of frameworks that are out there. Beyond that, I will defer to Mark Dixon, who's going to present later today UK time. So he'll obviously walk you through a lot more of the improvements in TOGAF 9. But yeah, I think data driven, of course, is something that needs to be is important, but don't see it as the only way. Right, EA fundamentally is a structural way of thinking, and structural and two-dimension is absolutely the way that architects should think. That's it. If you ask an architect why they, what's unique about them, they fundamentally see things as a big structure, which visually, they might start waving their hands around. They see it in 3D in their mind. It is a two-dimensional, three-dimensional, and we of course have embodied that as a graph structure. And pictorially, with diagrams that have lines between them, is a critical capability of architects to be comfortable with, but overlay them with metrics if you need to. So we have annotations. You can have little call outs on all the different shapes on your diagrams, but also have catalogs where the two work hand in hand together. Sorry, I know that was a long answer. Sorry, Peter. I don't know how many questions we've got. Sorry, but I'll try and be quicker on the next ones.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so one sort of at least referencing another meta model, another one from the Open Group, I believe, Archimate. Can we add a cybersecurity analysis into our existing Archimate model?
The short answer is yes, but again, you're going to have to overlay some other security framework into that, which is fine and you can do. So, whether it's NIST or SABSA or something like that, We again, as a an adaptable tool, that's what we do time in and time out when we onboard clients, is we merge different frameworks together and reconcile any of the inconsistencies they have, so that yes, absolutely, you can have a hybrid of Archimate with SABSA and I don't know, AWS at the technology layer if you want. That's fine. But that's not to be taken lightly. I mean, we can do all that. Abacus is an incredibly configurable tool. You don't have to write code. You don't have to do anything. It's all just drag and drops. But absolutely, there's a lot of implications when you do that. Something might break, right? Something may be inconsistent between those frameworks, and that's where our onboarding specialists that you'll work with will walk you through that. That's what we do day in and day out, have been doing for 20 years. So, yeah. So I guess the answer is yes, Peter, as I should have just said.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So then moving on to another one. How does Abacus help in metrics management?
It's interesting. Like, I'm not too sure what they mean there. I mean, obviously, a lot of the thread I've talked about is, Abacus can do metrics, and maybe it was asked before I got into that heavily. If it's actually where you see a metric as an object in itself, so there are frameworks like that. So, for example, Cobit has that. There's ones where they recognize a metric as an object itself, and you show that different parts of your enterprise are related to that metric. So that's fine. We've done that, and we can do that. So you can have metrics or KPIs as a metric themselves. Quite often, objectives in a lot of the frameworks. When you look at the strategic part of a framework, there'll be something in there like an objective or something like that, and that decomposes or indeed is directly a metric. So yes, how you can show the different parts of your business basically contributing to that objective is sometimes valuable, aside from actually the value of that metric itself, which Abacus can create as well and calculate potentially.
Okay, cool. Another question actually referring to metrics, which then links into another question on cloud migration. So the first was, what metrics should we focus on for cloud migration? Someone else had also asked, give me here, I can't see the one now. How do we model cost savings when moving to the cloud in Abacus? Does this require current and target states?
No, okay. So look, that's a massive topic. We've got some blogs on that, which I'm assuming we've got the people's contact details maybe when they've put the question in. So we'll have to follow up with those people, I guess, directly. The short thing I'd say though is, again, if cloud is seen as a cost saver and it's all around OpEx and things like that, then fine. We have, of course, a whole total cost of ownership algorithm within Abacus built in. You start getting into the technical debt concept right as well. So we've got all that in there. So you can start to show that, by deploying bad things, say yourself, is correcting any of the technical debt you may have incurred in the past. And no, you don't have to have a future state architecture and a current state architecture. So again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the way Abacus can work, is that you can have multiple architectures and you can do trade-off analysis across architectures. So you can actually do comparative analysis for metrics. You can, even within one architecture, show a cost evolution. Okay, because we do lifecycle cost within an architecture as well. So you can even show as elements of the architecture come online, and the life cycle of a project delivers things that affects maybe the costs of different services. You can see that over like a 10-year life cycle. So you don't have to have future state architectures where you're modeling. I mean, you tend to use future state architectures to show an entirely different kind of way of doing things, or an entire project and how things might affect things, often as a sandbox, before you approve something. Okay, separate to your kind of inline stuff you'll do within an architecture, which can show a whole life cycle cost within an architecture, and you can see how the costs may fall over the next 5 years as you start to realize whatever your cost reduction initiatives are. So yeah, again, like I said, but the main thrust of that, what metrics, that's there's any number of pages written about that we can send through to you.
Perfect. So look, we'll follow up on these and indeed other questions that I won't be able to get to, or Tim won't be able to get to right now. Just one more, Tim. I'm conscious that we're running over, but this is an interesting question to finish up on. Do you think the EA division eventually becomes the division leading the company, since most decisions will be based on their information, as in overflow between the CEO and EA?
No, I mean, I see people say that the CEO is really the chief architect in a company, and that's fine, all sounds nice. No, I don't think so. I think, I mean, look at where we've got. okay, it depends how long, but look where we're coming from. You're coming from a position where CFOs see IT as a cost center, and indeed a cost center that should be less than 2%. Now, do they see EA as part of the cost center? By and large, yes. Whenever you do see surveys about who do the architects report into, it's invariably into the CTOs, the CIOs, and things like that. It's not the CFO, right? It's seen as a cost center. No, I think ideologically, and again, that's my joke about the CEO in a company, the fundamental theory of what architects do, which is thinking structurally and seeing the whole rather than the parts, is without a doubt what a CEO should see and how they should think. And I absolutely think architects have some really interesting perspectives to bring to the very top table on the board and all that sort of stuff. Do I think that's going to happen in the next, how many am I saying, 5 years, was it, by 2025? No, absolutely not. I mean, I thought it was going to happen in 5 years, 20 years ago, right? No, it's going to be a long, long journey. And there's no doubt about it. It will be seen as more valuable. I mean, we have a role to play that as a vendor in this space, right? As we make our tool more and more capable and more powerful to help you guys as architects shine and be heroes within your companies, that's going to help. And our reputation's already, as good as it is. You saw that, EAs are the best job in the world at the moment. But that doesn't necessarily translate to our ability to influence things yet. So we've got a lot to go on that. But yeah, we're getting better, and that's fine. I'm on this journey with you guys. I'm on not in the trough of disillusionment at the moment. I'm somewhere in the optimistic side of things. So yeah.